Hey, welcome everybody. This is the National Telehealth Conference supported by our colleagues at HRSA. You are tuned in to the Healthcare Innovation in Telehealth session. So for the next 60 minutes, my colleagues and I will focus on federal efforts for healthcare innovation in telehealth and the future for telehealth technologies and how they intersect with artificial intelligence, interoperability, remote patient monitoring, and all of the above in that whole ecosystem in health IT, as I like to say. I'm your humble moderator for today. My name is Steve Posnack. I serve as the Deputy National Coordinator for Health Information Technology at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. I'm going to dive in with my presentation first, but then I will be turning it over to an esteemed panel of colleagues from both HHS and the VA, so including panelists from the National Institutes of Health, the Food and Drug Administration, the Office for Civil Rights, and again, the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs. So with that, I'm going to dive right in and get my presentation going here for you. I wanted to briefly update you all on a final regulation that ONC, my office, put forward at the beginning of this year. It is chock full of all sorts of health IT related policies, but the things that I thought would be relevant to this particular conference and that intersection with artificial intelligence includes some policies that we've now put in place for health information technology and transparency around those algorithms. You know, really briefly for everybody, as I mentioned, we're part of the United States Department of Health and Human Services. We are your health IT related people. We're focusing on a number of things, but the top three that we really surround our focus on includes building on this digital foundation now that we've been driving toward for the better part of the past 2 decades. That includes work around data standards, health IT related gaps, this care continuum that we talk about, and certainly an area in which telehealth is emerging, and then broader health IT related alignment policies with our colleagues at other agencies that can have effect and combine our authorities for cumulative impact from a federal health IT and government perspective. We're also working on areas to make interoperability easier. And that, again, is another area where our telehealth related technologies will play a role. We have nationwide network type work going on through the Trusted Exchange Framework and Common Agreement. We have standards-based activities to facilitate application programming interfaces. That includes the Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources Standard, FHIR, if you're familiar with that. And then we also work on other policies to create incentives or guidelines and guardrails around what's called information blocking. And that was another set of policies that were established as part of the 21st Century Cures Act. Lastly, this third priority category area for us is our focus on ensuring the proper use of digital information and technology, and that includes our artificial intelligence related work. So when you think about our office and the work that we do, really quickly, we do standards related work with a variety of different standards organizations out there. We run a health IT certification program. So for those of you that are familiar with electronic health records and the like, they go through that certification program. And then we also focus again on a lot of health information exchange. So I'm going to really quickly breeze through. The slide that I've got up here right now is really just to give you a sense of what health IT, especially electronic health record adoption, looks like now into 2024. If you can believe it, we are 2 decades in as a result of the HITECH Act and the policy incentives and intervention that took place with what used to be called Meaningful Use Stage 1, now is referred to as promoting interoperability programs through our colleagues at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, among many other programs that reference ONC Certified Health IT. But the reason why I show this is because our certification program now has a pretty wide footprint and scale in terms of its impact as we change technical requirements and standards through our regulatory processes. And so you can see that hospitals are nearly 100% in terms of their adoption of certified health IT. And then we're getting close, for ambulatory providers, office-based physicians, we're about 80% of the way, I'm sure more incrementally over in the future as well. When it comes to the HTI-1, as we refer to it, our rulemaking and the policies that we've put in place, the one thing that we've really been focused on is around algorithmic transparency. And so we know across all of those different healthcare providers out there that are using decision support type tools, there's a greater need for understanding how more complicated, more complex technologies are being built into their electronic health record systems or connected to or with those electronic healthcare record systems. And so we've been looking at areas to improve transparency, to improve trustworthiness around what we call predictive decision support interventions. So that's really that AI space. There's another category which I'm not going to focus on today that we describe as evidence-based, which are really more the rules-based decision support interventions that are built into products and then include, guidelines and other types of things that are really more deterministic. So we've really set out to include as part of our certification program a number of things to advance transparency and understanding about how these new technologies come into play. And that, again, as we look at the telehealth environment, is going to have an intersection with that aspect of our work. The one thing that I did want to call to your attention, as you know, we all love acronyms. We describe our general approach and the principles by which we subscribe for the transparency factors that we've included in our rulemaking. To focus on this acronym, we refer to as FAID. So it's the third row there on the slide: fair, appropriate, valid, effective, and safe. And so those are the types of transparency-related principles that we're baking into our regulatory processes. All right. As we look at this ecosystem, we know that performance equality is still building. There's a lot of new evidence base, and as I think you'll hear from my colleagues as well, we're all looking for ways to have kind of that quote-unquote nutrition label to give people readily available, easily to consume information about the types of algorithms that they may be including or models that they may be including and using within their products. And so we want to accomplish a number of things through this transparency, including supporting the ability for local setting updates, customization, performance monitoring from a post-deployment perspective, and to give customers, users of that health IT systems, the ability to get a better understanding of how the technology that they've put into place is performing, and especially regard to different settings and different uses. With respect to the predictive decision support interventions. So I'm going to talk about the timeline for compliance in just a second, but that really starts to be that new nutrition facts label from electronic health records for these types of algorithms that are built in to the electronic health record technology. We have 9 categories that we've laid out for the different types of those 31 source attributes. And this is just a high level, bird's eye view. What that really looks like when we dive down deep into it is the split out of all of the different types of information that need to be transparent and accessible to those clinical users within their certified EHR technology. And we've got plenty of resources on our website, so hopefully you're not taking a screenshot or anything, and the slides will, I think, be made available too. But I would encourage you to go to healthit.gov if you want to learn more information about these policies and the transparency requirements that we've built in. Just the last thing from an implementation timeline and requirements perspective, as many of you know, and as I've indicated, our regulatory authority applies to developers of certified health IT. And so they have certain requirements, some of which start at come to fruition at the end of this year, I should say, or comply by the end of this year, that they have to meet. And then when it comes to healthcare providers, they're the ones participating in a variety of different programs that require certified health IT. And so that it relies on our other federal agencies. Most of the time, that's our colleagues at CMS that are requiring the continued use of certified health IT for participation in CMS programs. And so there are lots of changes that will be coming, but this year is an important year with respect to introducing these new transparency requirements into certified health IT and then getting them into the hands of customers for their use in 2025. So with that, I want to make sure that we stay on time today because I'm both your moderator and MC. And any questions, feel free to reach out. You can check out our website at healthit.gov again. And with that, I will turn it over to our next presenter, which will be our colleague Susan from NIH. Take it away, Susan.
Hi, give me 1 second. I have to do this trick here. with the sharing because I only have one screen, so I apologize for the. Okay. Okay. I hope you see everything okay. Thank you so much, Steve and colleagues, for the invitation to present today. I'm Susan Gregorick. I am the Associate Director of Data Science at the National Institutes of Health. I want to just reflect very briefly on the message from our director, Dr. Monica Bertinelli, who mentions that we have made great progress in research to accelerate advances in our scientific methods, such as new data analytics, data that are applied to everyone. It really can help rapidly make discoveries happen and to make equitable adoption in clinical care. So we have a mandate to really make sure that we accelerate scientific methods and apply these to improve the lives of all citizens. I'm going to speak most specifically about artificial intelligence, and I'm pretty sure that you're fairly familiar with all the exciting activities that are happening right now in artificial intelligence. And here's just a few activities that have come out from the literature and some news releases on AI, particularly AI Marvel. It's a random forest machine that was used to classify and diagnose Mendelian disorders. These are very, very hard to diagnose. It's very manual curation of information. So the AI Marvel application is thought to really improve the diagnosis of these diseases. New and exciting activities to bring together knowledge graphs with the traditional large language models. This will help really enhance our ability to hop around information and data in a much more facile way. And finally, I'm sure that you've heard about Google, who's just published their personal health large language model, PHLLM. It's a fine-tuned grain of their Gemini model. It's really interesting because it's tuned on real-world data, personal health data, for example, from wearables such as smartwatches and heart rate monitors, and other experimental telehealth data. So some really exciting things that are happening. We have a lot of exciting things that are happening at NIH, and I won't be able to tell you about everything, but I do want to just reflect that we have invested in FY23 over almost $300 million in artificial intelligence research and development of technologies. And with that, I want to just highlight a few of our key programs and ways in which you can get involved if you're interested. And the first is the Bridge to AI. Its primary goal is to generate AI ML ready flagship data sets, also to train new scientists in artificial intelligence and to develop best practices for implementing ethical principles for AI data sets. Some of those really great concepts that Steve mentioned about model cards and nutritional information is exactly what we want to see here in our programs in artificial intelligence as well. We have 4 main grand challenges. They briefly do involve telehealth to some degree. For example, our program on precision public health will use voice as a biomarker for disorders such as sleep apnea, mental health disorders, neurological disorders. We are supporting the functional genomic mapping of the human cell. This is both in time and in space, looking at integrating all those different types of omics, genomics, proteomics, metabolomics across the human cells. We are also developing programs that will construct a temporal atlas of pathogenesis and salutogenesis. Salutogenesis is a study of how you recover to health from disease, and these are applications that are primarily in type 2 diabetes for underserved populations, and it's a great partnership with the American Native American partnerships. And finally, we're expanding our AI in clinical care, looking primarily at the ICU to define and develop new AI algorithms to address and diagnose acute illness. Another program that I want to highlight just very quickly is our program on artificial intelligence and machine learning to advance health equity and researcher diversity. This program enhances the participation and representation of researchers and their communities that are primarily underserved in the development and use of AI. What I want to show you is a highlight from this program to sort of bring telehealth to middle school students. So this is a consortium project. Aim Ahead works with communities across the United States. This is a community not too far from where I live in Alexandria City Public Schools. It's providing minority middle schoolers with real hands-on interactive education and health information in computing and artificial intelligence. And these kids actually work with software developers who are developing a particular app called Teens Like Me to help explain health and health situations for teens. The software developers who are designing these apps actually work with the students, and the students participate in the design, they participate in the implementation, and then they do some testing. And you can see a few screenshots from some of the work in just this one example. There's so many I could highlight, but I thought this was a really cool one. Additionally, through our National Aging Institute, we do have programs in artificial technology collaboratories. And this is, of course, helping Americans live longer and healthier lives. This is focused on advancing technologies that utilize artificial intelligence, could be generative AI, or integrating AI into robotics or virtual realities, or even wearable sensors. I want to highlight one particular example from this, which is using conversation and conversational analysis, the way people speak and interact with an AI bot to determine if there's onset of early dementia in the home. And so this is an approach to detect early onset dementia. It is with and in partnership, a small company called wellsaid.ai. And here, this company is investigating the ways of interacting through speech to find early signals from memory loss that could threaten independence of aging communities. There are additional programs in very specific institutes. For example, the National Institute of Biomedical Engineering and Bioimaging to improve health by leading in the development and acceleration of biomedical technologies. And you see three main thrust areas in bioengineering, in bioimaging, and in health informatics. These are funding programs that researchers can apply to. I want to show you a quick snapshot of some of the funded types of work that we're doing just to support, just for example, technologies to assist in gait and movement. And there's three funded investigators. And one investigator that I'd like to highlight is Hao Su. He's developing a spine hip exoskeleton that has a learning-based optimal control for how to alleviate lower back pain. And so this is an integrated platform. It's both an engineering platform for the exoskeleton as well as an advanced AI to help optimal control of the exoskeleton. And one of the things that I want to mention is that this particular application, oh, thank you for the heart, is a part of a joint program with NSF called Smart and Connected Health. And so Smart and Connected Health is a long-standing partnership with NSF, and we do have some very strong partnerships with other agencies. This particular partnership funds both computer scientists or statisticians or mathematicians and biomedical researchers to look at interagency high risk, high reward advances. We are looking at new methods development to collect, to sense, connect, to analyze, interpret data, both from individuals, both from devices, and even from whole systems. We really want to fund interdisciplinary teams. We're interested in a lot of different types of research, fair and trustworthiness of AI, transformative analytics. We're very interested in multimodal and reconfigurable sensing systems, and I'll talk a little bit more about multimodal AI. There's a strong push for cyber physical systems and robotics, and then of course, more traditional biomedical image interpretation with AI. And then if you're really keen on hard problems, the unpacking of health disparities and health equities using artificial intelligence. So there's a little knot down there at the bottom, knot OD 23165. If you Google that, you will get the funding announcement and all of the information. Speaking of multimodal AI, if you go to an AI conference, you've probably heard that many talks talk about how we can really integrate in a meaningful way multiple data types, either in time and space, from different types of biosensors integrated with EHR or ambient sensors. And we'd really like to integrate that with, for example, omics data, genomics data, imaging data. So multimodal AIs, it's really an area that we'd like to invest in. There's unique opportunities and risk challenges in utilizing and developing multimodal AI that we're interested in, as well as also identifying the appropriate uses of multimodal AI and ethical principles. So this is a program that we've started this year and will hopefully continue for the next several years. There is just so much good work that we're doing in AI at NIH, but there are challenges in trustworthy ethical AI, making sure that the data is well documented, as Steve said, with those really important nutritional information and model cards. We want to make sure the data is unbiased. We also want to make sure that we can collect data that represents our participants in their environments and their social determinants of health. And you can see an article that's a few years old now about how, if we do integrate information about where people live, their education, their employment into our traditional AI models that include our healthcare data, traditional healthcare data, we actually can improve our ability to predict such things as heart failure, particularly among underserved populations, which is really, really important. So we want to make sure that we're improving our healthcare research and we're applying data in the way that's appropriate and comprehensive. So thinking of that and looking forward, we're interested in facilitating ways in which we can develop an artificial intelligence learning health system by achieving better access to data and assessing health outcomes that really would matter to people and to our society. We absolutely want to eliminate the very costly collection processes that currently exist, as well as the many, many ways in which we have to reformat data. We want to make sure that we reduce burden on our clinical care sites for data submission. We want to partner with you, but we don't want to partner with you in such a way that it is a burden for you and for us. We certainly want to increase the quality of the data that we can get from electronic health systems. We want to speed the time to data access. For example, right now, if you're interested in SEER surveillance data for cancer, it's at least a 2-year time lag from the time that you report your outcomes of cancer to the time that we get that into our SEER registry. So this is something that we can improve, and everybody is committed to that. And finally, we really want to deliver the data from our healthcare environments that can be used for high-value AI applications. We are a partner with the National AI Research Resource. We will love to be able to partner with healthcare providers and make this data available through NAIR and through other mechanisms. And with that, I think I caught the 10-minute mark. I thank you for your time and attention, and I really look forward to your questions. And I'm going to stop sharing. Over to you, Matt.
Thanks very much, Susan. And can you load up the slides, please? My name is Matt Diamond. I serve as the Chief Medical Officer here at the Digital Health Center of Excellence, which is based at the Device Center, or CDRH, at FDA. And it's a pleasure to be here at this National Telehealth Conference. The Digital Health Center of Excellence is based at the Device Center, as I mentioned, and we serve, though, not only FDA, but the federal government broadly and a broad set of stakeholders. We're a team of engineers, scientists, physicians, and policy experts who focus on digital health technologies, including software, AI, and related products. Could you go on to the next slide, please? So I'm going to talk today about our work promoting responsible innovation using digital health technologies, but I first want to highlight our mission at the Device Center, which is that patients in the US have access to high quality, safe, and effective medical devices of public health importance, first in the world. And that includes devices that are enabled by AI, software, and other digital health technologies. In everything that we do at CDRH, patients are at the heart of our work. Could you go on to the next slide, please? At the Digital Health Center of Excellence, we're working to really advance healthcare, foster responsible and high quality digital health innovation. And we see that digital health technologies are performing an increasingly important role in healthcare. And here are some snapshots of the way people are using digital health technologies, either to help monitor their own conditions, to enable patients to report their experiences, to measure and guide their behavior, help manage chronic conditions like diabetes, also helping healthcare professionals analyze medical data, including images. And we really see digital health technologies as being essential to help bring healthcare into the home and to improve access to healthcare, especially to underserved populations. Next slide. I want to provide a definition of digital health technologies. It's a pretty broad field, systems that use computing platforms, connectivity, software, and sensors for healthcare and related uses. And DHTs can be used as medical products, and that's a lot of our focus at CDRH. Also can be incorporated into a medical product, can be used as a wellness product or to develop or study medical products, or as a companion to other medical products like diagnostics or therapeutics. Next slide, please. And we really see digital health technologies functioning across the healthcare continuum, from prevention, diagnosis, treatment, rehab, all facets of healthcare management. And DHTs have the advantage of being able to either be on a person like a wearable device or in the home, to be incorporated into their lifestyle, to help us move from episodic snapshots of folks' health to a more continuous stream of data and more continuous support and interventions, and to help promote more preventive and proactive healthcare rather than a reactive episodic care. If you can go on to the next slide. I'm providing here, there we go, some examples of innovative digital health medical devices that we've authorized at FDA over the last few years. And just to move through these pretty quickly, there are technologies that actually deliver cognitive behavioral therapy, those that can detect certain types of diabetic retinopathy in settings where that screening would otherwise not be available, technologies that help guide the hand of a non-expert practitioner in obtaining imaging. On the upper right there, that's a cardiac ultrasound. There on the lower left, technologies that can serve as a second set of eyes, supporting a clinician or otherwise helping make a diagnosis on pathology, or helping patients on the lower right to monitor their arrhythmias. And not all of these technologies are telehealth technologies, but you can imagine how these and related products can help to support patients in their telehealth journey, providing interventions, providing opportunities to collect diagnostic information and to communicate that to their providers. Next slide. So at FDA, we focus on the subset of health technologies that meet the definition of a medical device. And what I wanted to highlight is we've put out a lot of information in the form of guidance to help the community understand, first of all, which products are the focus of FDA's oversight, and also what the requirements would be for obtaining FDA approval or clearance in order to market these products in the United States. And one guidance here that I've highlighted, if you want to learn more about our approach, it's a good one to start with. You can go on to the next slide, where it walks you through a number of different types of functions. This guidance is focused on medical software Where on the left side of the spectrum here, those that would not be the focus of FDA's oversight, and on the right side, that would be. And I wanted to point this out because you can see on the left, software that serves as a video conferencing portal intended for medical uses is not the focus of FDA's oversight. It's not a device. And we wanted to put out guidance like this to provide transparency and clarity that these products are not FDA regulated, and you know, our interest in doing this was to ensure that you know, that we could help promote innovation in this space by you know, not being a barrier to the marketing of these products. On the right side of the spectrum are software. For example, you see an EKG signal, collecting or analyzing an EKG signal. Those types of products, if they're intended for medical diagnosis or treatment, et cetera, are the focus of our oversight. And so a basic or you know, the telehealth platform is not FDA regulated, but if there are medical device functions, as we would call them, that are incorporated into any platform or service, if the technology is, for example, analyzing an EKG signal, then those are the focus of our oversight. And we really feel that advances in digital health technologies can help to provide a broader set of data and services and overall opportunities to enrich the telehealth experience, and to help bring these technologies and to help bring healthcare into the home setting. So I want to highlight, you know, one of the motivating priorities for all of our work. If you can go on to the next slide. It's one of our strategic priorities, which is to advance health equity, to empower people by supporting innovation, to make sure that products are available, that healthcare services are available, and to reduce barriers. And if you can go on to the next slide, there's an exciting program that we just launched a few months ago called Home as a Healthcare Hub. There is a virtual public meeting about this initiative actually next week. So there's a link on the bottom of the slide. All this information is also available on the FDA website. I'll tell you a little bit about this initiative. FDA is launching the co-creation of a prototype model of the home that can support the delivery of healthcare. And we're looking specifically at use cases involving different scenarios of patients living with diabetes in the home, and how the home is set up and how technology is designed to facilitate a successful delivery of healthcare in the home setting, incorporating not only prevention and wellness, but also management of chronic illness. So we're excited about that. Encourage you all to tune in next week and to share your thoughts as well on this initiative. And maybe in the last minute, I'm just going to very quickly run through a few resources that I don't have the time to discuss further, but if you go on to the next slide, let's go on to the next one. We have online tools to help you navigate through our guidances and our policies. Next slide. We participate in many collaborative communities who really and other venues to work with stakeholders. We take a collaborative approach, and again, all this information is on our on the FDA website. Next slide. And you can actually advance to the next one. I want to just highlight a special initiative we have to get input from patients directly. And that's our Patient Engagement Advisory Committee meeting with annual meetings to advise the agency on important topics, including emerging technologies. Next slide. We have a lot of information on our approach to artificial intelligence, and that we've held workshops, put out papers, guidances, and also worked with our international regulatory partners on these efforts. Next slide. We've authorized now more than about 800 artificial intelligence enabled medical devices, and we have a list of these products available as a resource on our website. Next slide. If you have additional questions, you can either, as I said, go to our website or email us. We have a special email account there on the lower right, digitalhealth@fda.hhs.gov. And we can often answer questions pretty quickly and point you to resources, especially related to our policy. Next slide. And maybe the last message for today from me here is to please come and engage with us. We're really here to support innovation and getting safe and effective technologies to patients. Engage with us early and often, and we'd really love to hear from you and to work with you. Next slide. Perfect. So feel free to reach out. I'm going to pass the microphone to Daniel and look forward to the discussion. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. Can we put the slides up, please? Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dan Shea. I'm the Associate Deputy Director in the Office for Civil Rights at HHS, and I'm in the Policy Division. And I am here to share some of the exciting work that OCR is doing in the space of AI in healthcare. So for folks who don't know, a brief introduction to OCR. We are the law enforcement agency at the Department of Health and Human Services with regard to the nation's civil rights and privacy laws in the area of healthcare. And we enforce these laws through a number of ways. So my division, the Policy Division, does rulemaking, guidances, policy, outreach, as well as assist enforcement division in their investigations of complaints filed against covered entities. I am here to announce, this is a little bit old, but as of May 6th, 2024, after reviewing and responding to over 85,000 comments, that's correct, over 85,000 comments, we have published a final rule implementing Section 1557. Next slide, please. So what is Section 1557? Well, Section 1557 is the non-discrimination provision in the Affordable Care Act, and it prohibits discrimination on the basis of longstanding civil rights authorities. It prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin, age, sex, and disability. And it applies to any health program or activity that receives federal funds. So think providers, hospitals, health insurance, and others. This final rule includes a few provisions that are relevant to AI in the healthcare space that I'll get to in a moment. But before we dive in, I want to flag a few items for the good of the group. First is that the rule has an effective date as of July 5th, subject to some litigation that we're going through right now. But that is the official effective date, and the AI provisions themselves have a delayed applicability date. That means the effective date's been moved forward by a little bit to give covered entities time to comply. And those rules go into effect on May 1st, 2025. Next slide. So the first part that's relevant to AI is our definition of patient care decision support tools. These tools, you can see there, are defined as any automated or non-automated tool, mechanism, method, technology, or combination thereof used by a covered entity to support clinical decision-making in its health programs or activities. So this would cover AI, certainly, that is used to support patient care. It would also cover algorithms used to determine things like medical necessity and prior authorization. It would cover equations such as EGFRs, flow charts like crisis standards of care plans, as well as certain medical devices. Next slide. So what does the rule prohibit? Well, this rule has three parts in its prohibition of discrimination, and you can see it right there in the slide. The first part, subpart A, is a general prohibition mirroring the existing prohibited bases of discrimination in the use of these tools. Part B and C kind of work together. So there's a duty to make reasonable efforts to identify the risk of discrimination in the use of these tools. And C is a duty to make reasonable efforts to mitigate that risk. So I'll just talk about each of these in turn. Subpart A restates, as I said, Section 1557's general prohibition against discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin, age, sex, and disability in the use of these tools. And so even when these tools don't input these bases as variables, discrimination in their use is still prohibited by this provision. Just to flag, since this is a telehealth conference, we have a very similar provision in 92.211 that similarly prohibits discrimination across the board in the use of telehealth as well. These obligations are longstanding. They existed before our rule went into effect, and we are simply clarifying and making clear that they continue to be prohibited when a covered entity is using these tools. Paragraph B aims to provide covered entities with greater specificity by really addressing situations where these tools directly rely on or use input variables and factors that measure race, color, national origin, age, sex, and disability. And when they do that, when these tools use these inputs, covered entities have an ongoing duty to make reasonable efforts to identify the risk. And then C is, as we noted, duty to make reasonable efforts to mitigate that risk. And we would consider what would be reasonable factors such as, what is the input variable or factor being used? So for example, age is often clinically appropriate. And so mitigation in those circumstances may simply be documenting when age is being used and the clinical need for it, whereas race is more suspect in general. We would also look at the purpose of the tool in question. What is it being used for? How critical the care is for the patient. We would also look at the covered entity's circumstances. So what that means is, what would be reasonable for one covered entity may not be for another, depending on their size and resources, whether the covered entity is using the tool in the manner intended by the developer, whether that use is approved by regulators, or whether they adapted the tool. We would also look at whether the covered entity has a process in place for evaluating the tools it adopts or uses. So some examples of mitigation measures that would be reasonable that covered entities could take in their use of these tools could be, simply stopping or pausing the use of the tool until it is deemed safe. Developing and implementing policies specific to how they use these tools, in training staff in how they use these tools, and or requiring a human to confirm outputs in their use of these tools. Next slide. Big picture, this is how you can reach us. As with all technologies, OCR supports the use of these tools. As we just heard before from Matthew and Susan, these tools provide great promise for not only improving health outcomes, but also reducing health disparities among underserved populations. But we've also all seen the literature. We know that there are great dangers that can be associated with the use of these tools. And so covered entities, as with any technologies, must exercise due diligence when acquiring and deploying these tools in their health programs and activities to be compliant with federal law. And with that, I will turn the mic over to Rena.
Terrific. I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. So, hi everyone. My name is Rena DeSacia. I'm a senior advisor in the Office of the Associate Deputy Undersecretary for Health in the Veterans Health Administration. in quality and patient safety. So I'm going to just give some prefacing remarks about our Veterans Health Administration and how it applies to telehealth and the work we're doing in our administration, as well as to give some framing comments on AI and how we're approaching that. And just to give reference to our administration and our healthcare system, we are the largest integrated health system in the United States. It oversees the delivery of care of more than 9 million enrolled veterans. And to take care of the veterans and their family, we actually employ close to 400,000 healthcare professionals. And that supports, across a variety of facilities, many of them being inpatient medical centers, but also outpatient sites of care, reflecting the complexity of care that we deliver for veterans that are in our health system. Now, we also have divided our health system into what we call regions. There are 18 veteran integrated service networks. We call them affectionately VISNs. So those are regional systems of care, and they were designed intentionally for us to meet the local needs and to provide better access to care for our veterans that are enrolled in VHA. As it relates to telehealth, and I'll give you the story about how we've approached that in this system, VA healthcare professionals are able to operate in every state. And so that we actually have established national standards of practice, which has allowed us to actually utilize our telehealth authorities, especially coming out of the pandemic. Right. Okay, so how we've approached actually virtual care technologies in VHA is really a continuum here. And you can see that, one of the levers that we really wanted to approach in this aspect was really to make sure that we were delivering better outcomes for our veterans by utilizing access to virtual care technologies, but as well as adopting those. So there's a lot of effort on the front end to make sure, first of all, our veterans have access to internet-enabled devices, making sure, for example, there's availability of broadband. But then there's a lot of training involved in the interim also to make sure that not only our veterans are comfortable with the devices, but as well as our providers. And there's a technical support team that's really allowing for that. An engagement and making sure the tools are effective so we can be delivering care. And then we start measuring actually the outcomes of the implementation of the telehealth. And you can see that our goals really are to have better engagement, but also to increase, self-efficacy, increase access, reducing wait times to seeing providers, and with the goal, obviously, to improving our health outcomes for our veterans, as well as, increasing convenience on both ends in terms of access to care. We've seen a tremendous growth in VHA's connected care services, and this slide shares with you some of that aspect around, video encounters, telehealth encounters, as well as looking at store and forward and telehealth encounters. And you can see really in the spike happened during the pandemic, where we saw an increased amount of growth of engagement on those encounters and those receiving, video telehealth, either at home or within a clinic or from clinic to clinic if we need, specialty involvement. And so we just want to really kind of stress that in these slides, how we have seen the adoption and trying to also promote the continued adoption of this within the health system. And as I mentioned, the COVID-19 pandemic really marked a significant turning point for us. We expanded our telehealth capacity to make sure that we were being able to deliver care when in-person care was not available. And Congress has mandated to us to really kind of look at the effectiveness of telehealth as we're expanding it as an access lever. And we realized that there wasn't any enterprise-wide quality measures that could help us assess the clinical effectiveness of the outcomes that we were delivering with telehealth. So we convened actually last year a external and internal federal stakeholder panel to help us identify a set of proposed metrics. And there are a few things I just want to share with you from that stakeholder input. And it's pretty clear that we're at the beginning of this journey of really trying to understand that balance of the effectiveness of telehealth with if we're delivering, better outcomes for our veterans. I think we are seeing them in particular around mental health delivery, some great examples of the use of that. But we need continued work to see how it's actually affecting utilization and actually helping patient outcomes from a longer time horizon. So a few comments here that we learned from our panel of stakeholders was that, there was a complete agreement that, telehealth is definitely a valuable component in modern healthcare systems, that we should continue to support that. But if the goal is to compare in-person and telehealth care, it may not be appropriate, given the wide range of services. I think it's also important to recognize that telehealth is embedded as another setting. And so we have hybrid care models out there that really blur the lines between in-person care and care that's only telehealth. So that really complicates the stratification process of being able to assess the effectiveness of telehealth. The other piece that we learned was that, with regard to assessing the quality of telehealth, it really requires tracking the modality of all care. So as we are thinking about what metrics that are currently in place to assess clinical effectiveness and outcomes as it relates to telehealth, that we should really think about some of these risk factors that may confound the results. So that includes patient demographics, their acuity, social risk factors. And so as we are collecting the data, as we're expanding telehealth within VHA, we are keeping a laser eye on those type of demographics and those stratification variables, so we can actually have a set of measures on target to see what we're doing. And more importantly, address this last comment that came from the stakeholders, which was really around safety constructs of telehealth. So as we're thinking about telehealth, application versus an inpatient population or in-person population, that we should be thinking about this concept of, where is it safe to be delivering this versus where it could create harm. And so we recognize while this field has continued to evolve, that we need to be really thinking about the challenges around this, including care coordination, fragmentation, and those social determinants of health, or social drivers now that folks are calling for health, that may influence the disparities as we're implementing these technologies. So then I wanted to just turn with a few minutes that I have, around artificial intelligence. And if you haven't seen the OMB's definitions for AI, I wanted to list them here. I have not heard the other panelists speak to it, so I just wanted to show this quickly to you, but I won't read through it. But want to share that, with the executive order of artificial intelligence, it's requiring agencies to be able to have use cases that are set forth that are looking at things that are right, and that there's some parameters around it that actually, mitigates risk as well. And so to end with, I just want to share a few use cases that we are employing. And so using that OMB definition that I flashed to you a few minutes ago, this is really 3 cases that we are applying as we're moving forward and thinking about the aspect of how to apply AI in our innovation and our technologies within VHA. One is to align with these definitions. We interpret an AI use case to be a software system that learns from the data. Second, we want to make sure it's supplementing human decision-making. It's not a replacement for human decision-making. And third, we want to be able to leverage the technology to expose new data to help us make forward-looking predictions and decisions about our veterans that we're taking care of, about our services that we're delivering within our agency. And so just to share with you some cases that we're considering here, given the fact that we're, as I mentioned, the largest integrated health system, we're starting to look at how can we leverage AI to help us provide some knowledge around clinical diagnoses, or helping our providers as they're determining and recommending medical treatments for our veterans. Obviously, risk assessment is a huge issue. And so looking at the things that we have in our electronic health record system to help us be smarter as we're making decisions on the front line, or whether we need to be flagging patients for interventions for an early intervention, for example, if there's a crisis. And lastly, looking at, carrying out medically relevant functions of medical devices. And the last part really talks about some things that we are not considering in our agency for use cases, but I think it's just illustrated to show how we're really trying to apply this to the front line to improve veteran outcomes. With that, and I know that we're at time, I'll stop, but happy to turn it back over to Steve for questions for the whole panel. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much for bringing us home, Rena. I'll invite Dan and Matt back on. Susan had a prior engagement, so we had her committed up until 2 o'clock, but she managed to sneak out during the other presentation. Real quickly, I'll try to dive into the questions. I'm keeping track of time. Matt, there was a quick one for you, just in terms of the FDA resources that you named. There are quite a bit, where those might be accessible for the public to access.
Yeah, thanks very much. And I'm just seeing that I'm going to put a link in to the chat with our digital health website, and then also a page specifically with the 15 and actually even some more guidances that I mentioned we've put out on digital health. I'll do that now. Thanks for asking.
Great. Dan, there's a quick question for you in terms of the effective date of the 1557 rule requirements.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I was just typing it in the chat. So the rules effective date for everything is July 5th, 2024. However, there are certain, because it's a big rule, it's a, on Word, it's like 600 plus pages. I don't know how long it is in the Federal Register, but it covers a lot of ground. There are certain provisions that we thought covered entities needed more time to comply with. So the date I gave was relevant to the AI provisions. You'll see it in the slides, but 92.210 B and C go into effect on May 1st. So in terms of complying with the identification and mitigation measures of the rule, those have a delayed effective date by 300 days.
Great, thanks. And I think with that, in the interest of making sure that you all can get to the next session for the conference, we're going to conclude today. You can virtually thumbs up or thanks and applaud the rest of my panelists there, however you do those reactions in Zoom. And thank you very much for attending our panel. It was chock full of content, and I think I want to say thank you again to my other federal colleagues here. We reached out to them and guilted them on to joining with us today. Just kidding. As you can see, we got a wide spectrum and variety of different federal agencies and their efforts around telehealth and innovative care. So with that, thank you for your attendance today, and best wishes.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.